Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining our live stream tonight for the incredible Paranation by Dana Suskind. We just got this in our hands very recently. We are so excited to host tonight's event. We are The Novel Neighbor. We are a local independent bookstore in St. Louis, Missouri. We sell all different types of books, including parenting and nonfiction, fiction, genre. We're so excited to be here tonight. We have carefully curated gifts as well. So I am going to pass over to the incredible Dana Suskind, as well as Heidi Stevens, who she's in conversation with. But first, I'm going to introduce them. So Heidi is the creative director of Paranation. Prior to joining the Paranation team, Heidi worked at the Chicago Tribune for 2 decades as a writer and editor focused on parenting, social justice, and communities. For the past decade, she wrote a daily column called Balancing Act. Heidi was awarded the Anne Keegan Award for Distinguished Journalism in 2018, and she maintains a nationally syndicated column once a week and lives in Chicago with her husband and 2 children. We will bring Heidi on in just 1 second. And we are also joined tonight by the lady of the hour, Dana Suskind. Dana is the founder and co-director of the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health, the director of the Pediatric Cochlear Implant Program, and professor of surgery, pediatrics, and public policy affiliated at the University of Chicago. A recognized thought leader on the national stage, Dana has dedicated her research and clinical life to optimizing foundational brain development and preventing early cognitive disparities and their lifelong impact. Her work is focused in particular on helping parents leverage their power as brain architects. Dr. Suskind is the author of 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain. She is a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics and a fellow for the Council on Early Childhood. Her work has been included by numerous media outlets, including the New York Times, The Economist, Forbes, NPR, and Freakonomics. So we are in for a treat this evening. I'm going to bring on Heidi. I'm going to bring on Dana. Dana and Heidi, thank you so much for being here. We could not be more excited, and I know that tonight's conversation is going to be incredible. If you are watching, you can ask questions in the comments, and we will do a Q&A with Heidi and Dana at the end, and Paranation is available on our website. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for that lovely intro.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to hop off, but I'll see you guys at the end.
Great. Hi, Dana.
Wonderful. Hello.
I think we're getting a tiny bit of feedback on your mic. Is there something you did earlier that unfeedbacked it?
Yeah. I'll just turn it off. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, perfect. Headphones.
Good. Okay. Excited to have this conversation with you because I love having any conversation with you. Maybe we could start by talking about the journey from your first book, 30 Million Words, to this book, Paranation. Both I know are informed by your roles as a pediatric surgeon and a social scientist, and also as a mother, and really by your gift, I would say, of widening your lens within each of those roles to see what all children need, even outside of the 4 walls that you're in on any given day. So maybe just walk us through that journey from the first book to this one.
Thank you. It's true. It's when I think back about how I started off in medical school to where I am now, I would have never guessed that this would have been where I would have ended up. But really, I always like to say that my work started in the operating room. I started, as a pediatric cochlear implant surgeon, implanting little children born deaf, all who looked like they had similar potentials for learning how to talk and learn. But pretty early on in my practice, I started noticing profound differences in their outcomes, with some of the children excelling developmentally and others not at all. Some learning to talk, others not at all. It was quite clear that the ability to hear didn't always unlock the children's full capacity to learn and thrive intellectually. It was an incredibly painful difference to see. And frankly, I view my role as a physician not to finish the surgery, but to ensure that all my patients do well. And because of this, refusing to accept or ignore these disparities, and more importantly, wanting to understand what I could do to better allow all my children to thrive, it began a journey far outside the operating room into the world of social sciences. I started a center called the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health here at the University of Chicago. I wrote a book in 2015 called 30 Million Words, Building a Child's Brain, because I wanted to take the science that I learned, the science that really showed that the critical importance of the first 3 years of life and the power of language in interaction to build child's brain, and spread it far and wide, and to really allow all parents, really all caregivers, to understand the power that they hold for building children's brains. In starting this journey and in writing this book, I had hoped that the powerful brain science that was being shared would, not only allow parents to know how important they were, but importantly, that society would see the important role that parents and caregivers played and really start investing more and better. While it happened at some level, what was quite clear is that despite my team and I developing programs and interventions and sharing it far and wide, and parents enthusiastically consuming it, societal shifts didn't happen. In fact, what was so clear was the larger realities of a family's circumstances, their work constraints, economic stressors, bad luck or injustices, all mattered as much, if not more, for healthy brain development, and that parents could, embrace this important role, but societal constructs often would get in the way and prevent it from happening. So, once again, faced with the fact that here we had all this science, but society wasn't putting it into action, parents were, I decided to write another book that would take that same science and really imagine, how it could inform a society going forward that really put children and their healthy brain development and parents at the center, and that it might help galvanize parents and their allies to speak with a collective voice and really help push policymakers in our workplaces and our communities to better support them. That was a long-winded way of saying what I said, but that's how I got to Paranation.
Yeah, it makes so much sense when you put it that way, that it, you can hand parents all of the research and the evidence and even the strategies you want, but if they don't have the ability to put them into place because of the obstacles that are in their path, then we're never really gonna make progress.
Yeah.
The timing of this book, the timing of Paranation, feels really essential to me, coming on the heels of a pandemic, which we're sort of still trying to emerge from. COVID has laid bare and really even exacerbated so many of our inequities and revealed shortcomings of so many of our systems, especially around child care and education, as anyone who's watching knows. But also it has provided this clarity and a chance for a reset. I hear people say the word reset all the time, and we even heard, policymakers talk about building back better. And so here comes your book to say, yes, it is time for a reset. And now that we're remaking these broken systems and talking about how to move forward, let's remake them with the brain science as our North Star. So talk about that a little bit, the timing.
Yeah, I would have never imagined this, this moment in time and how important this issue, not just, the book, but all that's going on in the world. Because the truth is, the pandemic was like a powerful earthquake, which really demonstrated just how shaky our nation's infrastructure of supports for parents and therefore children really is. Millions of parents were forced to scrape by with no backup whatsoever. Parents were left on their own to manage every aspect of their children's lives. And any parent on this webinar could probably relate. They were forced to be teachers, coaches, therapists, counselors every day, all day long. And even those among them who didn't lose their jobs, millions of parents, mostly mothers, ended up quitting or cutting back on work hours. It was just unsustainable. And, as we slowly make our way towards recovery, we're seeing how the lack of accessible, high quality childcare hampers workers' abilities to return to their jobs, and employers' abilities to staff their workplaces, and the economy's ability to rebound. I mean, we think of early childcare issues are just about the children, but it is foundational to all of our country's workings. But I really believe that the neuroscience can offer a roadmap forward. Just as it tells us what to prioritize individually as parents, it can show us, as I mentioned, where to go societally as well to optimize the healthy brain development of all children. And so how do I mean that? How does this provide a roadmap? It's sort of counterintuitive, but in truth, the neuroscience tells us quite clearly that we need to begin support when learning begins, not on the first day of school, but the first day of life. And the brain's incredible ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections is at its peak between birth through age 3. We often think about learning begins when you step into pre-K or kindergarten, but no, the first day of life. And there is no period of time when the brain is more plastic and there's more, brain growth during those first 3 years of life. It also shows us that environment matters. It matters tremendously. Children need stable, calm environment to help foster not just their cognitive ability, but their socio-emotional skills and executive function, because disruptive environment really impedes its development. And frankly, our society robs way too many families of the opportunity to provide healthy environments for children. And the resulting toxic stress really becomes a risk factor that endangers healthy brain development.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the pathway forward. So,
yeah. Well, when you state it so clearly, it feels like we live in an upside down world, that those first 3 years are when the vast, vast, vast majority of brain growth occurs. And yet it's really the time when parents are left completely on their own to figure out how one parent can stay home if that's what their value system supports, how both can go back to work and find a high quality childcare situation, how they can get some paid leave off of work. It's just, you're so sort of searching in the dark during those years, and it's both clarifying and a little bit disturbing to understand how much is happening inside your baby's brain during that kind of isolating alone time, right, in a parent life. Talk a little bit about this idea of parents moving toward a collective identity. That's a big part of your book. Galvanizing and speaking with one voice on some of these issues.
Absolutely. And before I jump in, I want to just relate to something that you said earlier. It's amazing, all this brain development that we're not seeing. And I often wonder, if we could see into a baby's brain, right? If we saw a million new neural connections that happened, if we could see that 85% of brain development that's happening in the first 3 years of life, would we be moved to action, more urgently? When you see, we think about malnutrition and, you see a child starving. I think most of us leap to action, but I think part of the problem is that, all these kids look, rosy cheeked and adorable, and you don't see the huge impact of the early years. But I'm sorry, I digress. It just made me think about it. But, here we have all this powerful neuroscience saying that this is the most important time, that it's the future, not only of the children, but the well-being of our country. But why haven't we moved things forward? And I think part of it comes down to the fact that children don't vote, right? And parents and caregivers who are the ones who care deeply for these children and will go, as a pediatric physician, I can tell you, parents, and as a parent, we will go to the ends of the earth for our children. But we don't have a way to consolidate the strength of our passion and desire to move things forward in this country. And so as a result, in my thinking, I was like, if we could find a way to bring parents together and bring their voice, what a difference would make. But it would require us to start thinking of ourselves as a larger group, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, we don't view ourselves as a larger collective, that we are parents. We, suffer from the same sleepless nights and stressing out about childcare. But when we look to the left and right, we don't see parents, we see some other identifying group, right? And, and that's an issue. But at the same time, here we've got, on a conservative level, 40 million plus parents of children in the earliest years. And, if there would be a way to unite us, to push forward the policies that will both support our children and support us in being able to care for our children as we want, what a difference this world would be.
Yeah. Yeah, because you often hear these issues debated or tied to one party or the other, or championed or voted down by one party or the other. But I get the feeling, and I certainly got the feeling reading your book, that when you talk to actual parents, they don't think of these issues along political lines. They think of them along financial lines, economic lines, ability to, pursue the career they dreamed of pursuing, or stay home for the number of weeks or months or years that they dreamed of. It's not about, party affiliation as much as it is the need to live your life and raise your children the way you had always hoped.
Yeah, no, in writing this book, especially with the moment of COVID, when it became so clear that parents were struggling mightily, I really opened up the aperture of families that I was interviewing and talking with. Initially, it was families that we had worked with at the center, primarily low-income families from the south side of Chicago, who faced barriers that you can't even imagine, right? It's almost impossible. But, I wanted to sort of widen the lens, and I talked to parents from all different backgrounds: racial, ethnic, educational, socioeconomic, religious, political. And I was struck by just the commonality, that at the end of the day, all parents just want to give their children the best opportunity to thrive in this world, that they were all struggling mightily, and they all sort of felt like it was on them that they were struggling. And, when I gave them a magic wand, no matter their background, and they said it a little bit different, but ultimately they all imagined similar societal supports that would, at the end of the day, allow them to parent the way that they wanted. This book and the brain science doesn't say that there's one way to parent, right? We often think of it as prescriptive. There are many ways to parent children. There's only one way to build a child's brain. That's through nurturing interaction, but it can be provided in many different ways. And we in this country have said that parental choice is sacrosanct, as it is. But what is so clear is that the social construct has resulted in there being often no choice for parents, but yet parents blaming themselves rather than understanding how societal constructs play a role.
That's right. That's right. When you're in the thick of it, it's really easy to feel like there's this formula and you just haven't stumbled upon it, right? There's this perfect equation. If you add this plus this and subtract this, then you'll finally have figured out parenting, right? And it also feels like other people have figured it out, right? It feels very isolating. I wonder if the parents that you talked to for the book and just throughout this work at the center, if they feel isolated or alone in their struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I think a lot has to do with the mythic idea of American individualism. The notion that Americans need to be tough and independent prevails, and it really perpetuates this going it alone as a virtuous ideal. And the result is to be convince parents, especially mothers, that they should be able to shoulder the enormous responsibility of early childhood care, education, and development on their own without support. And that if they struggle to do so, the failure is all on them. And that is what I found, that, this shame sort of not only brings it inward because we're embarrassed that we can't do it, but it isolates us. And, this is borne out in the research in many different realms. There is some powerful research showing overall that, non-parents, parents are usually less happy than non-parents in most developed nations, right? It's hard to raise a child, but that American parents are the least happy compared to non-parents, hands down. And that it really has to do with the fact that there are not the societal supports that there are in other countries. And this results in this big happiness gap, because of the lack of family-friendly policies. I mean, I can share some of examples, the fact that, we are the only country of 38 OECD countries without paid parental leave, and less than 77% of Americans who work in the private sector don't even have paid leave. 1 in 4 moms going back to work after 10 to 14 days after giving birth. It's crazy, right? I mean, the lack of supports, I can go on and on about just how little we invest. And, to top it off, it not only makes us less happy, but there is a uniquely American thing called, maternal guilt. We always think about, I even joke, that being a mother means that you always feel guilty for not doing well enough. Well, apparently this is an issue in this country alone, because when you don't in this country live up to the ideal of, being a good mother, in this country, you feel like you failed. In other countries, well, first of all, in Scandinavian countries, I don't even think it exists. In other countries like Italy, they're like, why am I not getting more support? But we really turn it inward. And it has both affected the mental health and the struggle that parents, especially moms, are feeling. And it seeps into the health and development of our children.
Well, sure. We saw that, again, going back to COVID, with the mass exodus from the labor force of so many women. I mean, at some point you reach a breaking point, and it's not even about happiness or guilt. It's just about logistics and whether you can pull this off or not. And so, when you have one member of a family leave the workforce, that can have, depending on your income level, really disastrous effects, right? Reduced earning power and savings, and possibly food insecurity and housing insecurity. And so, I think maybe for some people it's a little easier to shrug off happiness or, guilt. Those are sort of emotions, but these are real, dollars and cents, and family security issues as well. I
wanted to add something to the earning side of things. I read this fascinating article that really modeled the fact that, in this country, parents pay such a large portion of their income for childcare, right? In some places, from a mortgage or, college tuition.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the time when they should be saving, right, for retirement. Because you can imagine the long-term return on investment from investing early, but yet we're having them, put it into childcare rather than saving for their futures. So
yeah, I'll never forget that New York Times graphic that looked up, I think it was 17 or 18 countries, and from all over Scandinavia, Europe, South America. Of course, the U.S. was on the very bottom of spending on early childhood education, so children 2 and under. I think it was $200 a month that the United States spends, and
it was $500, yeah.
$500 a month.
Yeah.
but some of the countries at the top of the list were spending 30 grand, 28 grand. I mean, that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
Bit of an outlier.
We don't even have to be the 28, 29 grand. The average, and the average countries whose GDP is minuscule compared to ours, the average is $14,000 a year. I mean, we're not even close to the average of $500 per child per year. I don't think people realize how cheap we are with our future citizens.
Yeah. Do you think people are starting to connect some of those dots, either because of the pandemic or just shifting cultural norms? Or do you see any of this? Do you see a growing awareness, I suppose, which maybe is the beginning of change?
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. I mean, I think that the voices and the discussion are becoming louder and louder. I mean, when I think back to a couple of years ago, it was very much in the echo chamber, but I think it is exploding. The pandemic has really, accelerated it. I think parents are looking around and noticing, they're not alone. They're realizing that when parents repeat the same stories of struggle across the country, the problem isn't personal, it's systemic. And let's face it, systemic problems require systemic solutions. In Paranation, obviously it's a book that lays out how to go forward, but I'm always saying I'm a surgeon. I don't leave things up to chance. And for anyone listening, please go to our website, paranation.org, and there's lots of free downloadable resources. But one of my favorite is this big shift tool where, parents, you all are invited to take this sort of quiz where you state your needs, where you talk about the need for affordable childcare, time off for pediatricians, that sort of thing. And then you measure how many of these things that you have to do completely fall on the shoulder of the individual, on you, and what comparison compared to how much society and community is there to sort of help you out. It's a pretty poignant way to see how much of parents' needs are or aren't being met. And the great thing is then you're invited to imagine, what would a society look like if you had a magic wand where you're truly supported and you get to choose, what, I'd like paid family leave to be provided by, my institution or the policymaker, and that shifts it off your shoulders. And I think it's really important for parents and caregivers and people in this country really to know that we have a locus of control, that none of us parent alone. I mean, we are the ones who parent, but none of us should parent without support, that we don't just contribute to society, we create it. And you're creating the next wave of teachers, students, employees, employers, voters, parents. Really, parents are the guardians of our future, and we need that reframe.
Yeah, I love that. Talk a little bit about the founding of the AARP, which you write about in the book, and why there may be some parallels between what the AARP has been able to accomplish and what Paranation might be able to accomplish.
Yeah. And, I want to emphasize it's not just Paranation is putting out this ideal of a society that finally centers on children and families and what it looks like. It's, there are people across the country that are working. It's really about elevating all of our voices as a collective. And as I was thinking about why are we in this state in this country, how is it that we are such outliers with the largest GDP in the world and we do almost nothing for our children and families? And I realized, we've got the scientific case, we've got the economic case, we've got every case in the book. Why aren't we moving? And I looked for bright spots. And one of the most compelling stories is actually a story of another demographic who over a half a century ago was the poorest, most marginalized, voiceless group of society, the elderly. Back then, over 50% lived below the minimum standards of decency. They are like children are today, because children today, under 5 are the poorest, most under, segment of society. And through the AARP and their collective voice, no demographic is better cared for. Through Medicare and Social Security, no age group is better cared for. And in fact, the poverty rate dropped by 70% because of these policies and supports for the elderly. And I think that we can learn a lot because they galvanize, the elderly are as diverse as parents are today. They galvanize across race, education, socioeconomic level, political and religious affiliation. They're 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 independent. And together they advocated, I'm so sorry. They advocated, as you can tell, I advocated on behalf of this group. And I think parents and caregivers can be the same for each other, advocating, for all children and for parents and caregivers. So
yeah. Are there specific pieces of legislation you would like to see a group like that champion, or that you're even championing in Paranation or through the Building a Paranation campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to emphasize that Paranation isn't a policy book. I'm not a policy maker. I'm not a policy wonk. What I am is a physician and a researcher, a neuroscientist who can speak to why policies make sense for the healthy development of children. It's a framework to understand how everything fits together. And what I can tell you is that parents need time with their children, right? They need high quality childcare to complement their efforts. They need to be able to provide their children with stress-free homes. And I'd like legislation to support all of these goals. The specifics, I don't, I can, we can talk, for another hour about it. But, with that being said, things like paid parental and family leave, has been a proven benefit all members of a family. And the fact that America doesn't have it makes us a real outlier. I mean, paid leave has been shown to, obviously impact things from the economic standpoint, getting, mothers back to work, but, improving maternal and child attachment, decreasing postpartum depression, in decreasing infant mortality. I mean, the list goes on. It's great for dads, both with their bonding with their children and, if they're in a 2-parent household, really, improving gender equity at home and decreasing divorce. And there's even recent research showing that paid leave improves the neural functioning of babies. Natalie Brito from NYU showed, and her colleagues showed the impact on the neural brain waves of children. The list goes on. And why is it? It's really because at the end of the day, as I mentioned, these first 3 years of life, and especially the early days, which are the 4th trimester, are when the brain is most robust. And, it is when we should be investing more. So.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. I know that you spent a lot of years getting to know the individual parents whose stories are in the book, and understanding their struggles and also their triumphs, and the roadblocks that stand between, again, how they want to parent and what they know their children need and what they're actually able to provide. I wonder if you would mind sharing 1 or 2 of those stories with us, and what they taught you about parenting and America and resilience, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I mean, while the neuroscience provides the pathway for going forward, and the history and policies is, interweaved, within the book, really, I think what is most powerful are the families and their stories. I am in awe every day. I mean, that was my favorite part of writing this book. It was getting to know these families, and the range of experiences were dramatic. At the end of the day, they just wanted to give their children the best chance, but the range was dramatic. And I'll tell you, from, Kimberly Montez, who is actually a pediatrician, we don't think about physicians as dealing with these things, but she's a pediatrician who is at a community center, whose daughter was born at 27 weeks. I mean, super early. And she had to leave her new baby in the neonatal intensive care unit at 2 weeks after birth to go back to work. Can you imagine that? Because her family could not afford to live without her salary, and her state didn't mandate paid medical leave, nor did her job offer it. So she, despite being a pediatrician, knowing how important it was, she was forced to go back to work. I spent time with another woman, Jade, who came from a very different background. She is deeply religious, from the evangelical community, and deeply believes that the mother's place is in the home. Her mother, her grandmother, her aunt, every woman stayed home, and that was her dream. And I still remember, her explaining to me through her tears how the lack of health insurance and inadequate family income, her husband was a student teacher, sent her back to work at Starbucks after the kids were born, despite her dreams of being a stay-at-home mom. I could go on and on. Talia, who had 2 babies while earning a PhD in psychology here at the University of Chicago, had to give up a promising postdoctoral position when it became untenable to manage the demands of the job and the economics of childcare and the needs of 2 children under 4. I still hear one of the most impactful quotes she said to me. She goes, Dana, I felt like I was failing in all parts of my life. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're a brilliant PhD, went to, had her research published in Science, for any of you all know. So accomplished. And she was blaming herself rather than saying, why has society made it so hard on me? Yeah. I think, most searing of all, was the story of Michael and Kiana, whose son, Mikeon, missed out on his father's love and guidance and brain-building talk for the first 5 years of his life. Why? Because Michael spent that time in prison waiting for a crime he didn't commit. Not appealing or serving a sentence, mind you. He was just waiting for his case to be heard. He missed his first 5 years of life. To add an insult, he was exonerated in a day and a half. I don't know whether to be happy or just appalled. But I can tell you that each of these families and many other families taught me so much about parenting and resilience. And I can tell you their stories, that we can learn so much, in the hopes, and also that we understand the issues of criminal justice reform, systemic racism, healthcare, affordable housing are just as much early childhood issues as high quality childcare and paid leave. All of these things are parenting issues, and to really give every child a chance at life. One of my favorite parts of our campaign is something, it goes like this: the health and well-being of our children depends on the support for their parents. And this is very true.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you hope happens after people read Paranation?
I hope this book, first of all, I want parents to give themselves grace. These last 2 years have been hard, and there really is something called good enough parenting. I can tell you that as a mom of 8, and many of them out of the home. But I hope, honestly, that the book will remind parents that there is more that unites us than separates us, that it will help parents to see that they aren't alone in their struggles or aspirations, and that they need not go it alone when it comes to raising their children, and that it will make clear that we are stronger together. I hope it'll give parents and their allies what they need to succeed. My other hope is that it encourages us all to raise our expectations of society, to expect and really demand that communities, employers, policymakers do more to support parents in the critically important job of raising our next generation.
Yeah, I hope for that too.
Oh my gosh, that was such a good answer. I was like, okay,
I'm picturing a standing ovation in people's homes right now.
I'm like, oh, I wish you were here so that I could clap for you in person. And I have a few audience questions, but I don't. Heidi, if you had more, please, I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, I'd love to hear the audience questions. I have a million more I can get to if there's time, but let's do audience.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have somebody here who got their copy today, absolutely loves your books, is wondering which of your books was your favorite to write, favorite topic to explore through kind of this lens.
Oh, that's like asking your favorite child. But honestly, this book was the book that I always wanted to write. I love my first book, 30 Million Words, because I think that understanding the neuroscience in a deep way at the individual level is critical and foundational for this book and what we need to do in this world. But what was so clear with my first book is that when people read it, it made them feel empowered, but it just added more onto their shoulders rather than seeing how it can be used to reimagine our society. So how about this? If I had a dream, if I had a magic wand and I could only imagine one book, becoming a reality in our world, it would be Paranation, because then at the end of the day, all parents want the best for their children. And I don't think we realize how societal constructs really take away they constrain parents' ability to parent the way they want. So that's my magic wand. But thank you to that audience question. I love it. But I want to hear when he or she finishes reading, please email us. We want to hear what you think and put you to work.
Absolutely. I think that this is definitely one where it's like there's so much dialogue to be had. So as an author, it's got to feel like you want to have like a follow-up conversation with everyone.
Oh, yeah.
We have somebody who wants to know why this is a topic that you became passionate about and why you've kind of made it your life's work. Both of you obviously work in this field. And so I think it's something that we could hear both perspectives from, because take it away.
And I think it would be great, Heidi, if, because obviously we talked about the book, but it's much more than a book, and maybe talking about your work too, I think would be powerful for people to see really what we hope to manifest.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. And to follow up on your comment about an ongoing discussion, we wrote a book club discussion guide. So that's in the back of the book, and it's also on paranation.org if people want to download it or print it, or, if you're in a book club or you and a friend are both reading it, or even if you just read it on your own and want to sort of, make sure you're really digesting the big ideas, I guess. That's right there in the back of the book. We have a weekly newsletter we put out where we tell a different parent story each week. We call them community champions, and they're people who are really doing the work of building a parent nation, because we want to show what that looks like in real time and in action. And those all live on our website too. There's a section called Parent Stories at paranation.org. Dana mentioned the Big Shift tool, which we love, and then really kind of the showcase. Our probably favorite project is the parent villages that people are invited to join or host, and everything is on the website, free and downloadable, and in English and Spanish. And essentially, we are inviting people to, encouraging people to start small groups called villages of 6 or 8 people, maybe from your workplace or your child's school or your house of worship, and come together in community, maybe chip away a little bit at that feeling of isolation and loneliness, and then work on identifying a need or a problem in your community that you as a group could solve together. So, maybe you need a lactation room at your workplace that doesn't have one, or maybe your workplace doesn't even allow breaks to lactate, or maybe your city doesn't have a childcare center that's close to public transportation. We're not prescribing the problems. We're just providing the curriculum to, meet 4 times for 90 minutes and work toward a solution for the need or the problem. So it's really going to vary based on the individual villages and, you know, their geography and needs. So that's all right there on the website. If you go to get involved, you'll find parent villages. So those are exciting. We just really wanted to make sure that people, after reading the book and feeling inspired or frustrated or whatever emotion you're feeling, that there was something you could do with that, and not sort of just close the book and say like, okay, now I know how bad it is, or now I know what brought us to this point, or, but it's like, well, now what do I do about it? Because now I feel sort of energized. And so we're excited about all the ways that you can do that. And there's something that's just straight up called an action guide on the website too, that lists sort of things you could just do today or tomorrow to help build a Paranation. So it's a little bit of a tricky needle to thread, because we certainly don't want to put more on parents' plates. We know that they're the busiest and the ones who most need these reforms. And so it shouldn't be all on them to do the work of the reforms as well. But we also want to make sure parents understand their own power, and especially if, as Dana pointed out with the Aarp example, especially if we, I'm a parent, were able to galvanize and understand that really there's so much more that we have in common and that unites us than divides us. So it's been exciting work. I can't answer for Dana about why she's passionate about it, although I think what you were seeing in the operating room certainly spoke to that. For me, I knew Dana through, I had written about Dana's 30 Million Words book and TMW Center when I was still at the Chicago Tribune, and then we just stayed friends. And when she was telling me about Paranation in its early stages, the book wasn't even complete yet. I begged her to hire me.
No, you didn't beg me. I'm like, please come join me.
It was mutual begging. No, she didn't beg. I begged. I was like, I'm going to leave the Tribune and come work for you. That's such a cool project, and it's so necessary. So that's, for me, it just felt like exactly what the country needs, and exactly what children need and parents need, and exactly when we need it. It just felt urgent to me. So that's my answer.
Mutual begging is the best kind of begging. That was beautiful, and was also one of the questions I had. So you answered my audience question too, which is great, of like, what do we do now? Dr. Suskind, how did you find this work?
Please don't call me doctor. But, I actually, the funny thing is that if you look at the through line of being a physician, I view this as just part and parcel to being a physician and ensuring all my patients, are able to reach their potentials, have healthy development. My tools may have changed. It's not a scalpel or a drill, but it may be the tools of policymaking and social norm shifting, but it's all in service of the health and well-being of children and families. So it's just a continuation. You just sort of figure out, I got to do more. Got to widen the lens more.
Can I share one analogy that I've heard you talk about that I love?
Sure.
Dana has said in meetings before that, when she walks into the operating room, there's a team around her, and each individual is completely critical to the larger mission of implanting a child with a cochlear implant. And that doesn't mean she's not in charge. That doesn't mean she's not the surgeon, but she would never be expected to go in there without her team of, nurses and other supporters. And in a way, that's a good analogy or metaphor for parenting in the United States. It doesn't, to have a supportive system, to have safety nets, to have policies and norms in place that help you parent, doesn't take any of your power away. It doesn't mean that you're not your child's, first and best love and first and biggest teacher and all of those things that we all want to be for our children. you're not surrendering anything, and it's not taking anything away from you to have more support. So I love that analogy, because I think that sometimes, it can feel to people like, I should be able to do this all myself. I decided to have these children, or not even feel like that, but they're getting cultural messaging that's telling them that, right? Like, they're your kids, you raise them. And it's like, of course you're raising them. And also you need a team around you.
Yeah. I think that people would shudder if they thought I was taking their child back to the operating room without an anesthesiologist and nurse.
Right. Right.
No, I think that's a great metaphor, and I'm glad that you shared that, because I thought it was really wonderful to hear. We have a question. Earlier, you touched on some of your favorite stories that impacted the book and how you had gotten to know folks in the book. One of the questions is also about folks who've been impacted since the book, or since the work on Parent Nation has really begun in full. Have you connected with any families who have begun implementing any of these pieces, or have you connected with any families who've talked about how the book or your work in general has kind of started shaping their views of parenting? And that's to both of you. Any specific examples, or anybody who you remember and want to speak to?
Heidi, do you want to talk about the groups using the curriculum or the newsletter, or?
Yeah, I mean, so we have our national campaign director is named Yoli Flores. So Yoli has gathered thousands of parents from all across the country to beta test and give us feedback on this Parent Village curriculum. So it's been super, super parent led, and also parent advocacy organizations that have been, invested in this space and this labor for decades. Parents as teachers, and folks who who really are on the ground talking to parents about what they need day in and day out, and have been for decades. So what she heard over and over and over was that they felt so incredibly empowered by this curriculum, and so grateful to feel listened to and celebrated, and also guided towards some community, so that they didn't feel like they were alone in their struggles. So those are just getting off the ground in a real way, but the testing process, and the development process was really gratifying, I would say, because Yoli just heard over and over how helpful it was to parents to feel like they had an outlet, to create the kind of change that they need.
Yeah. She sort of said, like, especially taking the big shift tool, it sort of transformed them from feeling powerless or like victims to feeling, empowered, which is pretty exciting.
I think that's great. Any other takeaways that you want to make sure that everybody who is being introduced to Parent Nation for the first time tonight hears, or anybody who's a longtime fan of your work and is here to celebrate you? Anything else that you didn't feel like got mentioned?
No, other than, go to our website. There are so many great resources. Start, using your voice, elevating your expectation, and let's push forward for a Parent Nation.
I think that's incredible. All right, I have some very silly, very fun questions, but we like to send people off with a laugh, especially when a topic is serious. So really quick question on writing process. Do you write to music? If so, what is on the playlist?
I don't write to music, and I don't operate to music.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Isn't it funny? Which is sort of, no. How about you? Heidi's obviously a long-term journalist. Do you?
I turn on, this is going to sound so super hokey, but I go to Pandora and I turn on classical music for studying. That's my little channel. because it just focuses my brain, and honestly, all the years I was working in a newsroom, it helped me tune out all the loud coworkers. But if it's anything with lyrics, then I can't. Then it's like no, I need, because that's like new words in my head, and I'm trying to put words on a page, so it can't have lyrics for me anyway.
I totally hear that. What is your go-to coffee shop order?
Heidi, do you want to go first? Pete's?
Go to what kind of order?
Coffee shop. What do you order?
Oh.
Go to Starbucks or anywhere else?
Oh, so I have a pretty boring Starbucks order. I just get like a Pike Place with cream. But do you guys have Phil's coffee by you, or is that just a Chicago chain?
I used to live in LA, and we had Phil's in LA, but
we had Phil's.
Yeah.
So there's a Phil's not far from campus where Dana and I both work, and I'm a sucker for their iced mint mojito coffee.
Oh, it's a good drink.
So good.
Wow. I'm really boring. Iced coffee with almond milk and a Splenda.
That's
Oh my
yours?
gosh!
Wow, look at us.
Stop, that is so funny.
Okay, last question. What are you both reading right now?
Well, I'm not going to say Paranation because I read that early.
How many times have you read it?
3. But I just finished reading Marrying the Ketchup.
Oh, yeah, Jennifer Close.
Yeah. Yep, exactly, Jennifer Close. And loved it. It's Chicago set, it's juicy, it's lots of drama, and I love her writing voice.
We just had her in St. Louis last week to talk about that.
Did you?
So
oh, fun. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm deep in reading economics articles for some research we're doing. I'm such a nerd. So,
we need people like you, Dana. You're saving the world, and I'm reading a novel.
I feel really embarrassed, but yeah, the writing of the book, which I loved, that I could get deep into, research, history, science, but yeah, I'm also have to get back to writing those research articles, scientific articles. So
yeah. I think it's good to know that you should be reading those, and good job. Do you have anything else in the pipeline that you want to talk about yet? Or we're still fresh, so I don't want to be like, what's next, before anybody's ever gotten to read the book yet.
No, we're just going to see if we can, be part of the larger fire to move change in this country. I don't want 20 years from now for us to look back and still say, oh, I want us to look back 20 years from now and say, was there really a time where we didn't have paid leave? Seriously?
Right.
Not have. Right. I want just the craziness for us to be able to look back in retrospect and just roll our eyes. So
yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
let's all get together in 2042 and reminisce about the bad old days.
Yeah.
May 10th, 2042. See you here.
I'm in.
Thank you both so much. This was an incredible evening. Paranation is available now at the Novel Neighbor. We also you mentioned earlier book clubs, and that's an incredible idea. If you buy through a book club, we do 20% off on book clubs. So that's definitely a thing to consider and think about, because I think it's great, especially as we're getting together groups, coalition building, and organizing. So thank you, Dana. Thank you so much, Heidi. It was an incredible evening. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.